Today on Off the Clock, we're going to talk about what a lot of you have been talking about, the Astronomer Kiss Cam scandal. What would you have done if that was your company and two executives were caught in a viral moment? What would you have done if it wasn't a viral moment, but you caught two employees in a romantic relationship that was causing distraction at work? We're going to talk about it all, what happened and what you can and should have done if it was you, today on Off the Clock.
Welcome to Off the Clock, the webcast of employment attorneys at Miller Johnson, where we discuss what is happening in the HR world and provide practical insight and advice.
You know, I love this topic.
I know. Nothing like an actual real life event. I love that we're talking about what our listeners might have done if it were their organization, right? But also, as I was watching this whole thing go viral and my teenage kids and my mother were talking about it, I did think to myself several times, I bet there's so many HR folks out there who are so glad this isn't their organization and they're not having to deal with it. So.
And I bet so many HR folks were getting texts and calls and DMs from their friends and family, because how often is HR in the news?
Right. Yes.
And all of our friends in HR are thinking, finally HR is in the news.
Right.
But for this, so they were getting lots of questions, as were you and I.
Okay.
And if folks listening and watching are anything like me, it got a little frustrating. After the first day or two passed, it got a little frustrating because I kept thinking, you're missing the point. You're all missing the point.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to talk
the HR point,
more about that. Yes, the
so
HR point. Because you and I, we do counsel clients through these situations, sometimes C-suite situations, sometimes not, but relationships in the workplace that are discovered.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about what happened.
Yes, what did happen
first.
It all
for those who don't know.
Very, very quickly. On July 16th, Astronomer CEO and the chief people officer attended a Coldplay concert in town. The Kiss Cam spotted them in a romantic situation, assuming that they kissed for the camera. And then in some sort of confession,
seeming confession,
the way I'm phrasing it, the CEO ducks and the HR CPO puts her hands over her face. And then Chris Martin, the lead singer, says either they're very shy or they're having an affair, which just highlighted the whole
Exactly. In case
moment.
Anyone in the audience missed the moment, right? Chris Martin made sure that everybody was aware of the situation.
Yes, and then it went viral, I think, mostly because of their reaction when caught on camera. If they had just stood there, right, even if later people had found out they were having an affair at work, I mean, it just wouldn't have been that viral moment. But then,
what a world, right?
By the way,
what a world!
Guilt.
What a world! How hard is it to have an affair in this world these days? Right? I found it remarkable the number of people who must have been filming during the concert every single thing that was happening up to what was on the Kiss Cam with their phone.
Do you do that when you're
at a concert?
I
do not do that.
I don't either. I'm trying to enjoy the concert, for God's sakes. But I do see people the whole time. And I'm like, are you rewatching this at some point? Maybe they're hoping to get a viral moment and get paid for the film. Maybe now we will. I don't know.
Probably more so. Anywho, okay.
So that's all the fun stuff.
So it's the viral clip. Then what?
That travels around the world. The board of directors immediately initiates an internal investigation and at the same time places both executives on administrative leave. July 19th, only 3 days later, give or take, the CEO resigns, offers his resignation, and the board accepts. No shocker there. Shortly after the chief people officer resigns, the company's statement are that the resignations are necessary to uphold its values and culture. Leaders must exemplify the company's standards.
And we're going to go back to those words,
Yes.
right? So
Yep.
values, culture, and standards
Yes.
basically are what they said. Okay.
Not the word policy does not appear. That doesn't mean that's not relevant, but whoever was writing these things for them decided at least that the word policy.
Well, we know it wasn't the CPO. Right. Somebody must have.
Well, that brings me to my next point. Their communications team, PR, knocked it out of the park. Following a theme that I love in this world about never wasting a crisis, right? The company hires Gwyneth Paltrow, Chris Martin's ex-wife.
Who you can't make this up, is the ex-wife.
One of the most famous people in the world.
Of Coldplay.
Right? And she does a short little, it's not really an advertisement, but a thing that's meant to go on social media, short clip that I think they call it like fast advertising or something like that. Ryan Martin's company that just does hysterical things in response to cultural moments. So she's now does a tongue-in-cheek kind of ironic advertisement for Astronomer. And now let's rewind for just a moment. Astronomer is a small company.
Yeah, I think this is an important point because
that I did not know.
Be our listener, right? This could be our listeners' organization. It's only 300 employees.
300 employees. How many of you have 300 employees, right? Or less, or maybe slightly more. So this didn't make news because it was a big name, right, that we all knew. It made news because of the ducking. I'm still convinced it was the duck of infamy, right? But when they kept saying Astronomer CEO, and then he never explained what the company was or did, I kept thinking, what the hell is Astronomer? Right. And I had to Google it. Yeah. Actually, they had a ton of hits on their website, even before the Gwyneth Paltrow statement. So those are the basic facts. We should also mention that according to all of the reports, both executives were married and are married, apparently, right? So that is...
I think that's relevant. Hence the duck.
Hence the duck.
And the hiding of the face. That's right.
Yes. So that is certainly relevant here. So that begets the question, what would you have done? What would you have done if this happened at your company and you got an urgent text from the CEO, or not the CEO, but the board chair, and it wouldn't have been you as the CPO, but the board chair texts you in whatever role you're in, say, we have an emergency.
Right.
Got two executives having an affair and the whole world knows. Yep. And you're supposed to be the expert, right? That is a panic moment. So the first thing, and I think Astronomer did this based on, I don't know, of course, we have no inside information here. We're just putting two and two together based on what we saw and on reports we've read. But they seem to engage a communications PR professional very quickly.
Almost immediately.
Whether that was their first call or not, we'll never know. Yeah. But very quickly. And that's why that company response, I said, it wasn't HR drafted. That was a PR drafted statement. Every word very intentional.
Well, my guess is, I mean, this went viral so fast that I think the organization, whoever on the board found out about it, my guess is found out about it on social media.
Absolutely.
So at that point, there was no question that this was going to be a viral moment.
Probably from their kid.
Yes, probably from, let's be honest.
Or their mother, or whatever. Yes, everyone found it. And then, would have forwarded it to them immediately. It's always good to remember when something is getting publicity, even if it's not viral, because let's be honest, most things don't go viral. But things do get publicity, even in just a local media market sometimes, right? Or you think it could get publicity, that people would be interested. If they found out, it's great to engage a PR crisis communications professional.
Absolutely.
Right away.
But let's be clear. We are not saying that any time an organization has two employees having an affair, that is something that's going to go viral.
Oh, good Lord, no.
Who has the time? Your PR firm. This involved two high-level executives at a very public concert, right? So there were a confluence of factors here that made this thing blow up. So we're not saying whenever HR folks find out that two employees might be having an affair in the workplace, they need to call a PR firm. But
gosh, no.
That can be the case, and you're exactly right.
But when there is publicity, or you have reason to believe there could be,
right?
If the word gets out, that's when you engage in PR firm. You can always have them in the background just in case.
Yeah.
Right?
Can never hurt.
It can never hurt. It can never hurt. So let's just assume a situation now where it's not viral because you have the PR firm handling that side of it. And again, that's not likely to happen with most of our listeners and folks watching. So let's just assume it's a standard, an old-fashioned workplace affair.
If our listeners were tasked by the board chair, were asked, what do I do? Where the next place they're going to go to is, did these employees do something wrong? Right? That's their job. And so that's the $1 million question here, I think, right?
That is. Yes.
Did these two employees, aside from the PR,
right,
did they do something wrong? Either or both.
Yes, it could be one or the other or both. So I think that's very interesting. Let's step back for a moment and remember this is critical. And I know all of our HR folks picked up on this, even though their friends and relatives didn't. This was a direct report relationship with a power differential.
Right.
So there was a lot, and I know, I got it because people know I work a lot with HR, and basically an HR lawyer really is what we do. There was a lot. I can't believe someone in HR should have known better. The power differential between head of HR and CEO is no different than any other direct report relationship, right? So let's talk about the law first, and then we'll get to policy. Was it a violation of any law, what they did? We're just going to talk about federal law right now. Under federal law, there is nothing unlawful about having a consensual romantic relationship at work. And that includes extramarital affair relationships. Doesn't matter under the law.
When you say it doesn't matter, what you're saying is neither employee have done something unlawful themselves. And also, if the employer knew it was happening and it was consensual, the employer can't get sued for it either, right? They're not going to get in trouble as long as the relationship is consensual.
Let's just call it out. Lots of relationships start at work and go on forever, right? We all know people who met their spouses at work. It is unrealistic, frankly, for there to be a law that says no one can ever meet their partner at work. Because
we spend most of our life at work, sadly. Right? That would be difficult.
It happens all the time.
Right.
So the rule, the law is consensual. But let's pick that apart for a minute because the devil's in the details, right? And in this case, the devil's in that word, consensual. When there is a power dynamic between the two people in the relationship, it can often be deemed non-consensual after the fact, even if the person with less power in the moment didn't see it that way. They can argue later that they actually lacked, right, autonomy in that moment or agency to say no, right? And
that's exactly right.
So that's the danger in a direct report relationship. And then the other danger about relying on consensual is something you brought up before we started rolling that I thought was brilliant, which is a lot of relationships don't last forever.
No, right.
And then what happens?
Yeah, exactly.
In those situations.
Yes, and unless it's happily ever after, at some point then the relationship does become non-consensual by one party.
Yes.
Or the other, right?
At least one day before they know they want to break up with the person. They don't want to be with that person, right?
Right.
It has to occur to one of them.
Right, exactly. Yes.
And then where I see trouble at work and where I've worked with clients with these issues, I know you have too, is where one breaks up or tries to break up from what otherwise was a consensual relationship.
Yes.
Right? And the other person does not want that breakup to happen. And then we get into trouble. And then it becomes non-consensual behavior.
And to be clear, sometimes that reaction by the person who doesn't want to be broken up with would be fine outside of a workplace relationship. That person to continue to say, but I think we're great together, right? Can't we stay together, etc.
Can't we work this out?
Outside of that workplace dynamic, and to your point, even worse, a power differential between the two, that's not necessarily a terrible thing for that individual to do, but then it becomes much more complicated when you're in the workplace and the person being broken up with doesn't see it that way and would like the relationship to continue. And then all of a sudden we do get into a world of unlawful conduct on the part of the person who doesn't want to be broken up with, and potentially on the part of the employer as well.
Correct. And that is true even when there is not a power differential. I just want to be clear. Yes. That is true even between two completely equal colleagues. But then when you have a power differential, and it's the person here that breaks up and the person here that doesn't want to, and now there's a demotion or a lack of promotion or a transfer or something. Boy, that's when you really
then it becomes real threat.
Then it becomes a problem. But as far as we know, let's
then
go
they
back.
Call us.
Thank goodness.
Right.
But let's go back to Astronomer for a moment. We don't know we are assuming it was consensual for the purposes of this conversation.
It appeared to be so on the camera.
But we don't know with the power dynamic again. But for the purposes of this discussion, let's assume it was consensual, which means no violation of law. I got that question from friends and family, right? Is it like an actual violation of one of our laws for direct reports even to be dating, and if it's extramarital? No. Okay, so now let's talk about policy.
So HR person's going down the list. Have they done something wrong?
Right. Is there something violated a law
here? Okay, what about, is it a violation of a policy? And I think that would depend. You and I have seen all sorts of different policies around this topic.
Yeah.
And I can say I have seen no policies ever in my 25 plus years of doing this that explicitly prohibit employees from engaging in extramarital affairs. I've never seen a policy that says employees are not allowed to have affairs while they work here at the organization.
I completely agree. And I think I can speak on behalf of all of our clients that they don't want to get into that.
No, God, no.
For all sorts of reasons.
All sorts of reasons.
They don't want to be the morality police. Everyone comes with their own baggage and history. And sometimes, and I hate to be the one to say this, and this is not from personal experience, but sometimes it's complicated and separated. Does that mean it's an affair? I don't know. Does HR want to be making those judgment calls? They do not. Right?
I think our listeners can all agree on one thing.
Yes, I know that.
That's right.
So let's talk about the kinds of policies we have seen, and then let's take this scenario and see how it would play into typical policies. Not every employer, by the way, has a policy on relationships at work, and that's okay too, right? That's a choice. That's a fine choice. I have found that I think most do, at least the clients that work with us, and maybe that's a self-selected group, could be. But we do tend to see some things consistently in relationship policies. They almost always prohibit relationships between direct reports, right? So when someone is in a direct reporting relationship with another, they cannot be engaged. They can't be related. Sometimes it's a nepotism policy.
I was going to say, it's often in a nepotism
So it can be a familial relationship, but also a romantic relationship, right? Do you typically see that in
Correct.
policies?
Yeah. When I see it most often, it's through a nepotism policy that then is a little broader to being related as a family member, but it also includes being in a romantic relationship. That's right.
And then sometimes, not as often, but sometimes I see policies that prohibit relationships between members of management and non-members of management and this is more common, I think, in smaller companies where there's always going to be some, maybe not a direct reporting relationship, but there's always going to be some power play there that could impact whether it's consensual or not, right? And then it usually extends to familiar relationships too, because it's so small that someone's going to have some influence over raises, promotions, et cetera, et cetera. Some policies, and I love this language in a policy, go beyond that and prohibit relationships, mostly romantic now, that can cause distraction or disruption to the individuals involved or even to the broader workplace.
In the workplace, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is very helpful to have in your policy.
I agree with that. I like that because I think we'll see how it plays out when we apply it in this Astronomer case.
But you mentioned that most policies, I totally agree with you. I've never seen a policy that talks about whether it's an extramarital affair or two single people. But whether it is an extramarital affair certainly goes into the distraction.
How distracting it is in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's extramarital, I think it's more likely to be a distraction in the workplace because that's their opportunity to see each other. If it's an affair at work, that's the whole point.
So distracting in a different way than I meant it. You meant that individuals are going to be less productive at work because
Correct.
they're using their time to
at work
engage
to
in
engage
their
in the
relationship.
extramarital. I mean,
Right.
after all, there's a whole nother life outside of work that they have to attend to as well. I don't know about this. I don't know about all of these things, but it seems to me that if one were having an extramarital affair in the workplace, they would be more likely to be using working time. It's just a lot of time and energy. I don't know where the time comes from.
I'm just exhausted just thinking about that.
Exactly.
Already got work. I've already got home.
All right.
Enough of that. The last thing we see in some policies, these used to be really popular, now not as much, but I still see them and write them for clients. We call them love contracts. Yes. So these were part of policies, and it requires people who are in a relationship at work to come together to HR, who is now apparently the priest or the rabbi, right? Blessing the relationship. They actually sign a contract, which is not a marriage contract, but a contract nonetheless, that says 5 different ways that this is consensual. I promise it's consensual. I promise it's consensual. I will never say it's not consensual. And it makes sure they're aware that they can never be in a direct reporting relationship, and to let HR know when the relationship breaks up, and if they feel like there's been any unconsensual contact, that to let HR, non-consensual contact,
it's basically
let them know right away.
The idea of them is pretty solid. It's a cover your ass document for the organization. So I mean, of course, in this case, in the Astronomer case, they were not. Even if Astronomer had such a policy, I don't think they were going to sign a love contract.
In the history of the world, individuals at work where one of them is married has never walked into HR with their side piece
to disclose
and said, I'd like to tell you about this and sign it. And that is why I think they fell out of favor, is even people where it wasn't extramarital, it's just so weird to walk into HR and do it. So people found that it just wasn't working. Yeah. And so why have it in the first place? I'll give you one reason why to have it in the first place is then when we get into murky moral distraction, I'm not really sure where the line is. If you have to disclose rule and they didn't, boom, done. For clients where the culture is to adhere very strictly to policies when making a termination decision. Yep. Right? Okay. Cut and dry, easy decision to make. Okay, so those are love contracts. So now should we apply it?
Yes, please.
Let's assume they have a policy like we were just talking about. Not the non-management thing, that doesn't matter. But we do have individuals in a direct report situation. Let's assume there was you have to report relationships to HR, and who would they have reported it to anyway, because HR was involved here. If this client called you, let's just say it was the chair of the board since HR was involved, and said, Sarah, how should we go about thinking about this? And let's assume neither one resigned. Yeah. Right? So the employer actually had to make a decision, right, on what to do with employment. How would you have walked the client through these facts?
If there's a policy in place saying that this relationship shouldn't occur in the workplace because she reports directly to him, then technically both have violated the policy. But typically what I see most often is the person in the higher level position is held more accountable for making sure the policy had been followed. And I think that's right.
Me too. Mm-hmm. That's what I see most often as well.
Yes. Yeah. So in that case, they both would have violated the policy. The question is what employment action needs to be taken with regard to each of them. Yeah. And my very practical advice would be there's lots of options on the table here. The one option that I don't think is on the table is that she, in this case it's a she, in the lower level position should be treated more adversely than he should.
And that, by the way, is the first instinct.
Yeah.
Of many
because she was the HR
organizations.
person too. I mean, well, in the Astronomer case, I think
She
the
should've.
world sort of reacted as, oh my gosh, she's
Right.
head of HR.
But let's say she
How
was
could she-
CFO.
Yeah.
Let's just switch it up for just a minute. Or an assistant. A lot of organizations get a lot of pressure
Yeah.
to either fire or transfer to a less desirable
Sure.
position the lower ranking person, who not always, thank goodness, but oftentimes is female, right? And that does expose the organization to risk.
Absolutely.
If they do
Absolutely.
that.
That often comes from a place of the person in the higher level role often is viewed as more valuable in that role, and quite often for good reason. Right? Somebody's the CEO. The head of HR, let's assume it was the CFO. So it's the human resources person here having to make a decision.
Yeah.
Would rather not have to tell the board chair that the CEO should be fired.
Also, that's the person in this situation when it's the CEO that HR reports to too.
Yeah.
Right? There's a power dynamic there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it is often the instinct to remove the person with lower power. We urge you to resist that instinct and think about treating both the same, or perhaps the person with more power a little more harshly, holding them responsible.
And the options aren't just ending employment.
Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be.
People around.
Yeah. In larger organizations, right, you can transfer people around, allow them to pick. I've had some clients that say small organizations were really separating as a possibility. One of you needs to go. The two of you can decide between yourselves which one it is. And that's kind of an interesting take.
I agree with that, but I would be careful if there's the power dynamic still at play. I think what I would add is if an employer wanted to give folks that option, and it ended up being the case that the employee in the lower part of the power dynamic was the one being negatively impacted, minimally you'd want that person to sign off on something. Right. Making clear that that was truly voluntary and that's what they want to do.
Let's wrap up with one final point, and we'll come back to the actual facts for this one. Does it matter that her role was chief people officer? Should she have been held to a higher standard than the CFO or someone else?
Oh, that's a great question.
As the person responsible for enforcing policies in the workplace.
I think absolutely a human resource leader should be held to a very high standard of ensuring that workplace policies are followed. And in this case, there may not have been a policy, but even so, exercising really good judgment. Okay. Should she have been held to a higher standard than the CEO of the company? I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think the same is equally true of the CEO.
I am with you, and I found in the media, friends and family, they definitely came down harder on her. I don't know if that was a gender thing, or they kept saying as well it was. As HR, she should know him. And I kept saying, well, the CEO oversees her, so he actually should have known too. Right. Okay, so takeaways. Never get caught on a kiss cam.
Yeah, that's exactly. Or if you do, don't duck.
Don't duck.
Come on.
If you're having an affair, don't.
If you're having an affair, don't go to a Coldplay concert. If you're having an affair and go to a Coldplay concert and get caught on the kiss cam, don't duck. No. In all seriousness, good opportunity for our listeners to think through these things, think through the policies that its organization has, and whether it might want to make some changes. So.
Totally agree.
Thank you,
All
Rebecca.
right, this was fun. Thanks, Sarah. Off the Clock is getting ready to record its 100th episode. I can't believe it. For our 100th episode, we're going to have a little fun. Sarah and I are going to talk about some of our favorite HR stories, and we hope you can join us by sending us your favorite or funniest HR moments. Send it before October 1st, and we'll see if it makes the program.